Good morning. And tomorrow is election day. So it's time to get ready. If you haven't done any research yet, it's a little late, but you still have time. You can review the information at hand. Don't take CNN's, story as wholesale. You're going to have to look to different places. I would suggest going and tuning into Tim Pool's videos, maybe checking out Liberal Hive Mind, and also Joe Rogan, which kind of comes as a shock to a lot of people, but in reality, he's exploring topics that the mainstream media and big tech aren't going to explore. And even with that said, even with potential censorship coming his way, he stands to continue on this road. He just took that big deal with, what was it, Spotify, and over $100 million. That's a hell of a contract. And for a second there, it seemed like the Joe Rogan show was going to be up in the air. You had employees at Spotify essentially saying they were going to strike if they weren't given editorial rights over Joe Rogan's content. But that's an entirely different story. All it is to say is that Joe Rogan, he explores various topics. He doesn't come at them from left or right, more just has on different guests and tries to get to the truth. He asks them various questions. He asks them about where they lean on different subjects, and then asks for the basis of their decision, how they came to fall on one side of the decision here. So Joe Rogan's a good source of information, which you wouldn't expect. You'd never think that an MMA fighter who made his career fighting and then hosting Fear Factor and now hosting also UFC, as well as the Joe Rogan Experience, you would have never guessed that someone who fights for a living and does stand-up comedy would be a source of real information. But he's a hell of a source. And if you don't want to watch it for political reasons, you can watch it for the various episodes that he does, just kind of diving into the human experience, which I think is how he came up with the name, the Joe Rogan Experience. But it's important to explore different avenues of information right now, because every time you turn on the TV, whether it's CNN or Fox, you're getting told this one-sided version of the story that is clearly biased, and it doesn't help you make a good decision. So if you watch Fox and only Fox, you're going to come out of this thinking Biden is the devil and Trump is going to save mankind. And if you watch CNN, just flip those, that story there, and you've got it. Trump's the devil and Biden's going to save mankind. So you're not really getting a story. You're just getting spoon-fed this way to think. They're telling you how to think. They're not giving you facts. They're telling you what you should think, rather than telling you the facts of a story and allowing you to make a decision for yourself, which I think is what the news was originally intended for. It was for you to, break down the information, as they give it to you, whether they're giving you data, whether they're giving you research, observational excerpts from different things going on, or just showing you video of incidents happening around the world or around the United States. And then you come to your conclusion, and I'm sure that, within your friend group or your social structure there, you're going to have debates about these topics, and maybe not. It might just be an echo chamber, but, some of us do have friends that will contradict our opinions, and we can kind of bounce these different thoughts and ideas off of each other till we come to a more sound conclusion. So that's a good reason why to stay away from mainstream media, because they're not giving you that opportunity. They're not giving you facts. They're not giving you data. And, you're essentially being told what to think. You can read, who's a really good one? Glenn Greenwald is a really good one. And he actually recently resigned from his own media outlet, which he co-founded, which I believe is called The Intercept. And the reason he resigned is because they were censoring his content. This is his own company, or one that he co-founded, and he's being censored. So he decided enough is enough. His original contract, if I'm correct, now I heard this on Tim Pool, so all the credit goes to him for breaking down this story and kind of giving me a basis to work with. But Glenn Greenwald, he resigned from his own paper because they were going to censor him. He was putting out information about the Biden laptop, which has been verified for anyone who's watching CNN and doesn't seem to think so. Multiple resources have verified it, including the FBI. And there's also allegedly, there's proof that Hunter Biden's lawyer has called the laptop repair shop and asked for it back. So if it's not their laptop, that's a weird thing to do. But Glenn Greenwald was breaking the story, and The Intercept was attempting to censor it. And in his contract, he had freedom to, publish whatever he wanted, and they were allowed to then publish counter pieces to, provide the other side's narrative to it. Give an attempt for someone who maybe didn't want to believe only Glenn Greenwald's take on it. But they didn't do that. Instead, they opted to censor. And another thing that he had in his contract was that he was allowed to then publish on another source if The Intercept stood against him publishing with them. And once again, they made an attempt to censor him and prevent him from publishing with another publisher, with another newspaper or other media outlet. So Glenn Greenwald resigned. He said enough is enough. This is the guy who broke the Snowden story, with the NSA and all the spying on United States citizens. So he's no spring chicken. He knows what he's doing, and he's a reputable reporter and journalist. And they made an attempt to censor the guy who literally broke one of the biggest invasion of privacy stories in our lifetime. Yeah, that just doesn't work. So Glenn Greenwald's a good one, and you can get the story from him. Aside from him is Matt Taibbi. I don't know as much about Matt. I know that he's not a pro-Trumper. I just read a story from him today. Just came into my email. It was the worst choice ever. And he's referring to our two candidates for president, Biden and Trump. And yeah, I think if you're looking at it from personalities, it is a bad choice. You have Trump, who's the bull in the china shop. He's going to run in there. He's essentially they've painted him to be a bully, and so be it. But then you have Biden, who, I don't know if he's senile, but he sure seems senile. And then when he's questioned, you can tell that he feels cornered, and he lashes out and attacks people. So it's not really great. I mean, you saw when the union workers were, he was giving a speech, he was visiting constituents or potential constituents that were members of a union, and one of the union members started asking him about his policies in which he was going to take your AR-14s, and Biden essentially yells at him and says that he doesn't work for you, or referring to the union member that was asking the question, which is kind of a funny thing, because I'm pretty sure most of us would agree that elected officials work for us. Maybe I'm crazy. It sure doesn't seem that way lately that they work for us, but I think that's the initial intent. But yeah, so he lashes out. He shouts at people, and Trump does similar things. Trump has said some grotesque things. Trump is also just not well spoken. Neither is Biden. Biden has his gaffes, and Trump has his, what would you even call him, when he's just winging it, and he says some things that don't make sense. He was trying to explain how he wanted to bring more choices to the consumer market, and so he deregulated their requirement for water efficiency. Now, this is just an example. He was talking about dishwashers and showers and what have you. And he's talking about how, they get more water now because there were issues with the energy efficient ones where it wasn't using an adequate amount of water. And so people were, in the case of dishwashers, running their dishwasher several times over and over again to get it clean. Now, that's his example. I don't know if that's true. I don't think I've had to run my dishwasher multiple times, but I don't even know if mine's energy efficient because it's just a dishwasher. I really don't care. It's great. I love the people that make it. I'm happy that they make this convenience item for me, but I don't look that far into it after that fact. If it works, great, good for me. But, he went off on a tangent saying, he washes his hair like 10 times or whatever. And it was just, it was just rambling, but he was shooting from the hip. He was trying to say something good and trying to say that by deregulating it and allowing these less efficient washers and showers and appliances to be put on the market, that those same people would then have the adequate amount of water necessary when they run it the first time, so that they wouldn't have to run it multiple times, which would then negate the energy efficiency, meant by the appliance. Because if it's meant to be energy efficient, you don't want to waste so much water running it. That's why you made it that way. But if you have to run it multiple times in order to get something clean, then you've negated the energy efficiency. You've used the same or more of that resource in order to accomplish your task. So that's what he was trying to say. He didn't get that point across well. So just know, personality-wise, speaking-wise, yeah, it might be the worst choice ever. But if you look at policy, now you can't really look at Biden policy. He did have the crime bill, which I can't say the crime bill was a terrible thing, and I can't say that it didn't help minimize crime in some of the bigger cities that were more impacted by drug crimes at the time. But it definitely had the negative impact of incarcerating more minority young men, especially because it seemed that the penalties that they had in these crime bills for drugs that were predominantly found in minority communities was much stronger than the penalties for drugs typically found in white communities. So you could say the bill was biased. So if you want an example of systemic racism, you can look right there at Biden's crime bill. But that's a different story. So crime was reduced. Maybe you could say it was from that, maybe not. Who knows? But then you look at, the impact that had later, and we're looking at these minority young men that have been in prison for years and years for nonviolent drug offenses, and their cohorts in the white community, maybe got smaller sentences. Maybe they weren't locked up at all. I don't know. I'm not looking at the data. I'm just saying it's odd. And they try not to talk about it too much because it's kind of a black mark on his record, because he's running and trying to say that he's the equality candidate that stands for, equal rights for all and fair and equal treatment for all. And, his background doesn't really paint that story. But then you have Trump, who his administration did the criminal justice reform, prison reform. I think it was the First Step Act. They've released many prisoners, many of them minorities that were incarcerated for whether it be nonviolent crimes or what have you. I haven't looked at the background for each crime, but I did see, the former prisoners that came and spoke at a press briefing, and, they were very happy with, obviously they were happy they got out of prison, but they were very happy with the Trump administration for helping them out. So you have the prison reform by the Trump administration. You have peace agreements in the Middle East, countries that have been at war with each other, or at least at odds with each other, for my entire lifetime, and most of you watching, I'm sure. And then Sudan and Israel, who were actually in a conflict, an actual war. That peace agreement truly did, at this moment in time anyway, end a war. So, this is the first president in many decades that hasn't brought us into a new war, a new conflict, and has actually reduced our footprint as far as military soldiers overseas. So if you're looking to not go to war, if you truly believe in peace, he might be the one for you. What else is there? Deregulating. Now, this is a touchy subject, because a lot of our fellow Americans, we care about our environment. We don't want to sacrifice our environment in order to, shore up our economy and have, more jobs. We obviously want the jobs, but we don't want to sacrifice nature to do it. Especially for people that don't live in the city, that get to enjoy the outdoors. As you can see all these trees behind me, I don't want nature to die off. I don't want to kill it. I don't want to sacrifice even the smallest animal, for the sake of, improving our economy, if that animal would truly be impacted and be gone forever, be extinct. But with that said, they're painting these stories as if somehow Trump's administration and these deregulations are sacrificing major portions of our world, whether it be the oceans, whether it be the forests, whether it be the atmosphere, whatever it is. They throw all kinds of stuff out here. They call him a climate denier. They call him all these kinds of things. And it's funny because climate denier is just their new term, and climate change is their new term because global warming didn't work and global cooling didn't make sense, and then just throw new stuff at it every day. I'm not going to disagree that climate's changing because it is. You don't even need to be a scientist to know that. But the deregulation that he has put in place, or his administration has put in place, has allowed us to become energy independent for the first time in my lifetime. Once again, I don't know the last time we were energy independent. We're now one of the primary exporters of oil in the world. Only 10 years ago, we were reliant on Russia and Saudi Arabia and other foreign partners, if you want to call them that, for our oil. And think about all the things that oil does. The petroleum industry is huge. Almost everything you do, everything you touch, practically, almost all of these things has, in some way, shape, or form, been shaped by the petroleum industry. The jobs market for the petroleum industry is millions and millions and millions. And, we've been shoring up that industry, that portion of our economy, strongly under the Trump administration, which has other consequences, if you want to call them, as a result. So as a result of that, you and me, as tax-paying Americans, are spending less money on gas. We're spending less money on some of the goods that are made using petroleum. Those things are becoming cheaper. You make the ingredients cheaper, then the final product becomes cheaper. And so you're saving some money there. And on top of that is, the tax cuts, but that's totally different. Anyways, they're saying that he's destroying, our environment. I'll give you one example because I saw this just yesterday. What was it? The Guardian, Rolling Stone, New York Times, all these different news media outlets were publishing stories about the Trump administration lifting regulations on the Tongass I hope I'm saying that right, the Tongass Natural Forest or National Forest in Alaska. And that was going to, essentially sacrifice the animals and the other, the wildlife, the trees, the environment in that area. And, they're calling it the lungs of North America. And they're not wrong. It's a massive forest. It's millions and millions of acres. It's huge. So I started doing some digging because these articles, the first one I saw was like lifeoutside.com. I could be getting it wrong. It was a terrible friggin' article. It had almost, I had to go through it with a fine-tooth comb to try to find the article because they didn't put it out there like, see for yourself and click on this source. No, it was this puff piece about all these animals that are here and all these trees that are here. And it didn't actually say what was being done by these restrictions being lifted. And the old restrictions, if you want to call it that, fell under this policy called the 2001 roadless rule. And I'll get to that in a second. But the piece that I was reading, I couldn't find the source. So I click on the source that they have referenced, which, I went to Google and I started searching. I wound up at The Guardian. I was reading their article, which they only referenced a source to Rolling Stone. So I go to the Rolling Stone and I read their whole article, and they source the New York Times. So I go to the New York Times, I read their whole article, and then their only source is also the New York Times. So I go to read their article, but I'm not willing to pay for the New York Times, so I can't read it because I've reached my daily limit. So I can't tell you if the New York Times second source that I found had the policy in it. Anyways, rewind, I find the policy, I read through it. It's called the 2001 roadless rule. And the 2001 roadless rule does, in fact, reduce and minimize the capability of corporations and municipalities in the area from logging and from paving new roads or repairing or reconstructing old roads. But it's misleading. If you don't read through the whole thing, and if you don't read through the new policy, which it has a fancier name, it's a lot longer. Just look up the 2001 roadless rule regulations lifted on Google, and you should be able to find the new policy. It's hard to find, but anyway, so you compare the 2001 roadless rule to the new policy, which is less restricting, and you find that under the old rule, on average, they logged 46 million board feet of wood, MMBF. That's the unit of measure they use for logging, and I'm not a logger. I'm just not cool enough, although I like those shirts. But so 46 million board feet. That's how many board feet of logs they're allowed to clear cut out of the Tongass and take away from the forest for whatever they're going to use it for. You know, the lumber industry is huge. We need it for a lot of things too. Under the new rule, 46 million board feet. That's what they estimate is going to be logged out of that area. So nothing changed. But I thought the Trump administration's restrictions being lifted were going to decimate the Tongass National Forest. But the amount of wood that they're taking out of the Tongass is roughly the same. Okay, so that's point number one. Point number two, under the 2001 roadless rule, they are allowed to pave over a 100-year period, 994, it may be 93, 95, I don't know, 994 miles of road in 100 years. In the new policy, which is less restricting, they are allowed to pave 1,043 miles of road, roughly 50 miles more in the course of 100 years. I'm sorry, that's not enough to be damning at all. It also allows for them to repair roads that are in disrepair. And you have to remember, or realize if you don't already know, that there are tribal communities that are out in the Tongass that have limited access to each other. They do have roads, they already exist. There are logging operations that already take place in the Tongass. Now, with disrepaired roads, you're limiting their ability to gain access to each other, and you're also making it more dangerous when they attempt to, especially when you consider the logging trucks, which are driving in and out, or at least driving out with massive loads of logs on disrepaired roads, maybe not even paved roads. And you know, what happens if these roads, because of the condition they're in, cause trucks to roll over? Now you're talking about a different environmental impact, because what if it catches fire and starts a massive forest fire in this national forest that has limited logging? So, you know, the ground floor in the forest is not clean. It's essentially, you know, a massive fuel load ripe for fires. No, and that's speculation, but I'm just saying, you know, with better roads, with better road conditions, and not really new roads, you're allowing for these tribal communities and these logging operations to more safely connect and leave or enter the national forest safely. So all I'm saying is, the old rule was over, you know, however many 100 acres, however many 100,000 acres of forest, of old growth and new growth. And the new one, it's over a larger area. So you're logging the same amount of wood, but over a larger area by hundreds of thousands of acres. So in reality, it's less clear cutting, because instead of focusing on a smaller area and cutting the same amount of trees out of there, you're in a much larger area, but you're only taking that same amount of trees out. So it's less likely clear cutting. So all that really says to you is that what you read and what the media sensationalizes is not necessarily the truth, even if it means you have to read through the Guardian, the Rolling Stone, the New York Times, the old policy, the new policy, which, by the way, that excerpt that I just quoted about the board feet was on page 45 of the new policy, 45. you have to do your own research. You can't just take the spoon and allow them to just feed you all these things, all these pieces of information that they're shaping to get you to think one way but they're not giving you the information. Now, mind you, like I said, these different articles that I tried to find the policy in no way, shape, or form told you actual metrics. They didn't tell you the data. They didn't tell you the quantity of logging or how many logs or whatever were being allowed to be removed from the forest. They didn't tell you how many more miles of road were being allowed over that same time span. And really the reason why is because it's not extravagant. It's not sensational. It's not even a big deal. It's just, they want you to hate him. They want you to hate him. Why? I don't know. They loved him before he was president. They being the media, the public, celebrities, but they want you to hate him now. I don't get it. I've almost lost entire track of what I'm trying to say. All I have here, my main point is, you may not have a great option on personality. It may in fact be, as Matt Taibbi headlined on his recent article on Substack, it may be the worst choice ever. But I think that's only on personality. If you're looking at policy, if you're looking at what they've done in their careers, now mind you, Biden's political career is much longer, but if you look at what they've accomplished in their careers, setting policy, taking action, and how it's affected the American public as a whole, I'm not even gonna, I think you probably know where I stand, because it's hard to hide a bias. I'm not trying to hide it. I'm trying to give you the facts, but the problem is like one doesn't have much policy to stand on, and one has done a lot in a very short time. I think you know who I'm talking about. So just do your research. Don't buy into what they're telling you until you've verified it for yourself. If you don't have time to do the research, then do enough research to find sources, media, political correspondents, journalists that you can trust. Whether it be an analyst like Tim Pool. I call him an analyst now, but he used to be, guy on the ground filming conflict. He's been in the shit. But also Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald. If you're looking for a little spiciness, you can go to Alex Jones. They've discredited him on a few things, like the crap he said about the school shooting a few years back. But he's been right on a lot of things. So, like anything else, you got to take it with a grain of salt. You got to do some of your own research. But those are some good ones. And those are pretty impartial. It seems like Tim Pool's really far right now. And I think it's just because everything's gone so crazy that's really the only place you can land with sanity. And he's not really far right. It's just anything compared to the current extreme left is considered far right. I mean, you could be a classical liberal and you would be considered far right in our current circumstances. So stay informed, do your research, and vote tomorrow. I'm Alex with LWS. I hope you guys stick in or tune into our channel. We're just getting started. We're going to try to produce a lot more stuff, a lot more more breakdowns of different controversial topics, and maybe even put boots on the ground in some of these conflict areas. So, just stand by. Stand back and stand by. We're going to have some good stuff for you. And, go vote tomorrow. I'm out.